Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I have no iPad tonight. So that means we going to really utilize that homework that y'all did last week. No, that was the reason for leaving the iPad. No, I left the iPad because it was charging up. But it's good that I left it. So who picked the Northern Kingdom? Just show of hands. Nobody can see your hands but me. Who picked the Northern Kingdom? Who picked the Southern Kingdom? Dang. Kind of figured I was going to come in here and the kings were still going to be together, even though the scriptures was going to divide them up. Well, since we got time and nobody picked the kingdom, I mean, I could just start talking about kingdom things then. All right, let's look through this book. So I like this book. This is a very everyday guide to the basic Bible. The reason why I like it, it's not so much of all the information that's in there. One, it's a good book for beginners. So if you ever have somebody who's having difficulty with understanding, not so much the doctrine in the Bible, because it's another book that was given to me a long time ago and it's actually helpful. But this one right here helps you understand the little nuances of how the world and the Bible and the people of the world was going together. So let's look at this timeline. All right. In relation to the Bible is going to be the first time, and I'll give you a timeline, and then I'll tell you what was happening in the rest of the world. Why I want to show you this is because we're going to be focusing on the internal conflict of the North and the South, the division that has happened between the two kings, rightfully so, because the Lord decreed it to be happening. But the rest of the world was still existing, and you'll be shocked and amazed at some of the things that was happening around the world. All right. So we're gonna pass. We passed Joshua. That Solomon, since this is where we are. Solomon, the third king, built the temple in Jerusalem. This is what he did. This was 950 BC. But also, while Solomon was building the temple, the Celtics, that's I always like saying that word. The Celtics invaded Britain. Assyria invented inflatable skins like rafts for soldiers to cross bodies of water. King Solomon died. The kingdom is divided into Israel, the 10 northern tribes, later called Samaria. We're going to get into that because Samaria was the capital. A lot of people hear Samaria and they're like, what Samaria? No, Samaria was the capital. Just like Jerusalem was the capital of Judea. I'm not saying that y'all should have did your homework, but if y'all did your homework, this is some of the things that would have came out with the homework. It would have pulled out what temple, where was worship. Because as you get into the book of Kings, these are going to be the little nuances that if you don't understand what was going on in the culture, some of the things might sound difficult, like Jeroboam Jeroboam. Jeroboam, when he said, hey, everybody's going to go to Jerusalem. We can't have that because if they did that, they would turn on us. Now, we understand that Jerusalem was there, but we also understand that Jeroboam later on, he did something he defiled Israel by setting up worship somewhere else in Samaria. So you also can understand by this notion, understand that is the temple, that's how they live, that internally they were so divided that it echoed throughout history. Anybody remember Luke 10? And Jesus is telling the story about walking down the road, guy get his head bashed in, and while he got his head bashed in, who came to his rescue? Right. Now the story actually makes sense because not only is this divide, and guess who the woman at the well was? Now hear this. When Jesus said, I come for the lost sheep of Israel. You see how the sheep has gotten lost over time? Not so much in a physical standpoint, because yes, they still were close to Jerusalem. They were close enough to walk down the roads of Damascus. But do you see, spiritually, it was disconnected. That's the lost sheep he was coming back for. The 10 tribes that had strayed so far away. We're getting ready to see some of their straying. So with that being said, Solomon builds the temple. Now we're going to talk about Elijah rising up. And then the prophets, Isaiah, Joel, Micah, Obadiah, they called them the minors, some of the majors. All right. But at the same time, while the prophets was prophesying, Homer wrote the Iliad, the Odyssey. Remember, anybody ever heard of the Iliad, the Greek Odyssey? So Homer wrote that. At the same time that Elijah is raining down fire from the sky, Homer is talking about traveling the world on this Odyssey fighting, I think it was like Medusa, stopping her with the stone. Y'all remember that? It was Clash of the Titans, classic movie with the little owl and he spin his head around. Tell me I'm not the only one that woke up on Saturday mornings at about 2 o'clock and Clash of the Titans was on and you watched it every time. Claymation, if you haven't seen it, don't watch the new one. Go watch the old one. It's cheesy, but it's good. Cheesy, but good. All right. So Homer's Odyssey was that thing that we watching movies about now. They were writing this. It seems far, but this is what I also want to let you line up. Time is not how we really see it. Because a lot of things look ancient on TV and how they show us, but it wasn't that far back. So, I mean, it was far, but again. All right, so at this time, Homer's writing Odyssey. Now, here's the thing that makes it so amazing. And the reason why I'm sharing a lot of this stuff, because I want you to think about the world that Israel is in while we're dealing with Israel. A lot of people, when we read the scriptures, we never paint the rest of the world. We go straight into the Bible and everything becomes ancient time, is dust everywhere. Who imagination, when you think about the Bible, you're walking down a dusty street, just cobblestones, people in like old robes. They got ropes around there. They ain't even got belts yet. They just out here struggling. Just, oh, it's dirt today. Oh, so, because that's how movies depict them, right? That everything is just shattered and nasty. It doesn't, but at the same time, guess what they were doing in Northern Europe? Ice skating. Which means the people in Northern Europe have fashioned blades to their shoes. They have probably went on the ice with their shoes at first, slipped and fell, and said, hey, we got to do something so we can be stable. I want you to understand that the world is moving along. So when we read the scriptures and when God is dealing with Israel directly, the rest of the world is doing whatever they want. They're ice skating. At the time, Elijah is raining down fire. There is no news channel to say, this just in. Over in Israel, a man standing in a desert with 200, Elijah's standing in the desert with 200 people around him. Next thing you know, fire can you imagine if we saw that on the news? We'll be shocked, right? Everybody like, ooh, we need to go over to Israel because that guy can call down fire. That's how the world is today. But back in the day, they wouldn't have heard this until it was written down. It was recorded by the oracle keepers of history. If I continue to go on, the Olympics in 70 BC, the first Olympic Games was held. You understand it. The Olympic Games is a what thing? What culture? Greek. So if the Greeks are organized enough to hold Olympic Games, which means they're citizens, they're people, they're coming collectively to see people run Olympic Games. And if you think about Daniel, and what did he come out? I know a lot of people wasn't here for when Eric taught Daniel, but what happened? The abomination and desolation of their time. What was he trying to do? He was trying to put up a temple to Hercules so they can celebrate the Olympic Games. You understand a lot of these things that's going on in history, because if you understand the history and the scriptures tie in, you see that the world that we sometimes paint about the scriptures, we might have to kind of close our eyes and add the rest of the world in to understand how easy it was for them to stray when it shouldn't have been, because right here, God is giving them the direct word. All right, make sure we close down the kingdom here. Oh, no, we got a little bit more. And I'm taking us all the way up to captivity because we know what happens. I'm not holding it back. We've already went over Daniel. All right. Rome became a city. This was 70-50 BC. False teeth were invented in Italy shortly after. I say this, if Rome became a city and Italy is making teeth, this lets you know, again, these economies outside of Jerusalem were built up. That way, when we hear what's getting ready to happen to the southern kingdoms, right? It shouldn't be a shock that outside of them stepping away from God's will, that other armies around the world were ready to make their move. When you hear somebody got gold, unattended, I'm not talking about what's going on in Israel. We know their wickedness. But now you hear the world. Man, it's a shiny gold city over there with gold layered temples and everything else. We out here making teeth and ice skating and boats. Said Assyria made boats. What's stopping us from seizing them? This is the outside world that was going on at the same time. What you
got? How Solomon was building up his chariots and start building shields and stuff out of metal. How Israel built up to compete with the other tribes and stuff that was already building up outside of Jerusalem.
And that is great to see. because that would be it, but Israel had already neighboring and bordering problems. So these problems were way out far, but they were close enough to be that we in here should understand what Israel's state was according to the rest of the world.
Yeah, because Sheba came and visited him because she heard from him way back down there.
She was far off. Now Africa wasn't that far off continent-wise. Everything was. I don't know. I don't know when the earth shifted, right? But we know the earth shifted. We know lands got separated. We know the islands, the specific islands, were once closer and they got separated. So again, when we think about the conquest, Alexander rode across these places, and a lot of places without ships. It was straight up horseback from point A to point B. A lot of times they would travel the entire world just to get to one destination by horsebacks. That's why horseback was such important. The reason why the Trojans, the Greeks, did so well is because they had ships. And when they had ships, they could park their ships right on the shore and offload the troops. Once the water turned into a battleground, that's when we start seeing the increase of the navies, the fighting force on there. But right now, think of everything being on land, right? Because Japan at the same time, and the reason why I'm saying this, Japan, when the people of Judea were taken into captivity in Babylon, the prophets during the time was Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. At this same time in the world, Japan had just established themselves as a nation. You see how if we don't see the world as a whole, when we look at Jerusalem, we think of an ancient time so far back that we forget that this history to us is a lot closer. One, because it's right there, but two, because it's spiritual. All right. Now that will close down all the stuff. Now keep in mind, if you ask me again, I'll run it back by you and tell you what some of the things is going on, like wooden teeth or having teeth. That's crazy. Because sometimes when I read the Bible and we're talking about all of the majesty that God, it's like the last thing I'm thinking about. Has anybody even thought about people in Judea at this? And I know it seems like I'm trailing off, but the kingdom right now is getting ready to be cracked. And if you think that the crack, yes, it came from their internal disobedience, but the crack around began to be affected first by the gods that they worshiped, right? They were only supposed to have one God. If I let new gods come in, new ways of thinking come in, well, open to the rest of the world come in. They were already supposed to be that opening to the world, right? But it changes when everybody comes in because they no longer come in to visit, they come in to bring things now. Before it was you come to see Yahweh, Elohim of hosts, who have set up his temple here. But afterwards now it's come in. And if you get here and you don't see the God that you worship, well, shoot, if you're a resident here, build it on up. What you got?
You made the point because God intended for Israel to be light in the world. Separate, right?
Set apart.
So they were supposed to have the influence on the rest of the world. And it happened vice versa. And I'm glad that you're painting this picture because a lot of us, including myself, there was a time I didn't think about heat or Japan just got started. I didn't think about all that. But when you do understand what was going on around them, it does help us understand what the scriptures tell us was going on within them. But yeah, God intended, and still now, he intends the church for us to be an influence on the world, right? And while we are by his sovereign hand, we also see that around us, people without the Spirit of God are affecting the church too.
Yeah. When we look at this, you painted the perfect picture. We as believers in here are now the New Jerusalem. We're now the representation of what that city was supposed to be. That light is in us, right? As we are the light of the world because Christ is in us. We're not the light because of us, but we are the light because of the Christ in us. So as we are the light, we're supposed to be like that. But if we, like Jerusalem, looks like everybody else, then how do the people gauge our city? You see what I'm saying? If we start to take the influence of the world versus influencing the world, how do people gauge our city? You know? So we look at that. All right. Now that we have had a little brief overture of everything that's going on around the world with Israel, and I see that we have not divided the kingdoms, I will help divide them for you. All right. I don't have my phone, which had a whole lot of notes, and a lot of beautiful things, but I think sometimes the old school way of just reading the text is the best way to divvy it up. So where do we leave off at last time? They are 11:31. But once I left my iPad, I already decided to do without the notes. Spirit led. 11:31. All right. Now 11:31, we had just finished up with the house being divided. The place in Judea, right, where the last son of David was going to go and reside. All right. Then we had Rehoboam, the servant of David, who had came, and he was given 10 kingdoms because he was found worthy for him to give into, right? But this wasn't done because Rehoboam or Jeroboam were like the cream of the crop people to do. We got to save it because Jeroboam is a good guy. We don't want him to be crushed. And we got to give this to Rehoboam because he's a great servant. One, it was because God's decree. But secondly, this is how it had to happen for us to see the division and also the fall. And it's also ultimately because this was a promise made to who? David. So this promise was made to David. The kingdom is tore up. All right. So we talk in 31, as we ended, we're seeing the garment. Now, the guy came up and he had the garment in his hand. He held it out. Psh, these 10 pieces are yours now. These 2, don't worry about them. They're Judea, thus said the Lord. That's where we are. So the kingdom is divided. All right, let's start with the scriptures. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus said the Lord, the God of Israel, see, I am tearing the reign out of the hands of Solomon, and shall give 10 tribes to you. So who hands is being torn out of it? Is it Rehoboam hand? Is it Rehoboam or Jeroboam? Which hands is it being torn out of? Not being torn out of their hands. Whose hands is it being torn out? Solomon. It's Solomon right now. It's Solomon's reign. Right? Because of what Solomon did is being torn. Because it's being torn out of Solomon's hand, even though it's not going to happen to his son. You see what I'm saying? I tear it out of Solomon's hand, but I take it away from his son, if that makes sense. Because Solomon is the one. His son, we see that his son go on and do some things, but right now Solomon is the one who did wickedness. But his son is the one that's going to be affected. But for the sake of David, he got to keep his kingdom, Judea, along with Benjamin, the other tribe. And we'll see that come in. All right. Because you have it says 33. Because you have forsaken me and bowed themselves, because they have forsaken me and bowed themselves down to an Ashereth. So that they would set these poles up. All right. And a lot of them was to a female goddess of fertility. I think it was the Philistines. Because I'm trying to put the god Dagon was the Philistines. And I believe it might have been the Amorites or the Moabites, which are all, remember, throughout the history lesson, who are the Amorites and the Moabites? Anybody remember? We just left Chronicles. We went through that whole genealogy. Goodness gracious, man. The Amorites and the Moabites came from Lot. Remember? After Sodom and Gomorrah burning down, fire everywhere, Lot's daughter said, might be a great idea. The world has just ended. We should sleep with our dad. They brought forth the Amorites and the Moabites. All right. So when you look at it, these different gods that they were worshiping. Oh yeah, no. That tell you the mighty one of the. And here's the T. Somebody help me out with this one. Every time I look at it, 31, 33. Sidonians, got it. They put a T before everything back in the day, so got it. Sorry. All right. To Kamash, the mighty one of the Moabites. All right. And Milcon, the mighty one, and the children of Ammon. Again, Amorites, Moabites. I would have just read on it. Would have just told me, right? All of them. They're the children of them and have not walked in my ways. So the people who were rescued back in the day from the destruction of Sodom, even though God said, hey, I want to destroy everybody. We know Abraham said, no, it got to be somebody in there. God said, find me one. And in the end, Lot came out as his family. But look what Lot brought out. Not blaming Lot, but this is the results of that. And now we see different gods that would have been taken care of back in the Old Testament are now kind of plaguing the people of Israel. Kind of went from just being a little nuisance over here to where like, yeah, go fight. To now it's like full blown. They're in the city. They're being worshipped. The people are intermingling like all throughout Jerusalem because this is what Solomon did. Solomon ushered in a new way to worship that was never supposed to be in here. But we got a long list of things. If we keep talking about these kings, we got a long list of things that probably shouldn't have been in there, but they're in there for our glory. Like the fact if you go back to Samuel, and they all approached Samuel and said, we want a king. Now look what happens when we have a king. A king leads to the people lead to this, right? What's up?
And you brought up a point about Solomon ushering in, and that's true. And we also remember that the idolatry in God's people started, way back, right? Even in the wilderness, right? And I'm connecting that to all people. We know that within all people there is an innate desire to worship something, someone, because God placed that in mankind.
Mm-hmm.
So while Solomon ushered in a new, technique of idolatry, the principle of idolatry had already been there. They just kind of Solomon ushered a different way of serving, because basically what we're talking about is putting anybody on the throne of your heart other than the Lord your God.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, not that it was idolatry was new, but Solomon did with the influence of people around him brought in a new.
His wives encouraged. But at the end of the day, and this is what I want to say about all of this, and I want to keep in mind. This is why I wanted to divide it up into kingdoms. At the end of the day, Solomon followed behind his wives. Sound very familiar to the garden, right? Again, this isn't me saying women are bad because of this. Solomon hearkened to women who had false beliefs. He probably could have got a good Israelite woman in there, and it would have been perfect. Like, hey, a perfectly happy marriage between the two. But that's a whole bunch of what ifs, right? We know Solomon didn't do that. Therefore, idolatry came in, not through the ways like you think. Remember, the ways like me and you would see it through the old ways, it would have came in by outside, meaning those who worshiped went outside of Israel to grab these things and bring them inside. Look at the story of Jacob, when he ran, his wife took the stuff that he didn't know. Then we got Korah in the desert who smuggled stuff in. Anytime it was a smuggling in, the penalty and the consequences was hectic. But this time it wasn't smuggled in. It was literally brought in by the person who was supposed to be keeping it out. He built the temple. You build one temple saying, this is the only God in the world, the God of my father, Abraham, Isaac. And then as soon as you meet a woman, and you're like, yeah, she kind of pretty. The next thing you know, baby, where you worship at? Oh, you got to go all the way to Egypt to do that, to worship Ra, this God, that God, that. Don't worry about it, baby. I'm Solomon. I'll build you whatever you want. Well, he got 700 wives standing in line for the same request. Well, what about your Moabite wife? She don't want to go over. She looking at her Egyptian counterpart saying, Solomon, you can't just have her a temple. I got to have one for me. Now, here's the crazy thing. Solomon still did what he needed to do at his temple, but he went to their temple. Do you understand what that's saying to the people? That we can worship multiple gods. Because if Solomon is doing it, we can do it. But here's what I want you to understand. As we go into the text and we start to see some of the other perspectives. It was a movie I love. Y'all got time in y'all movies, but it's a movie called, was it 8mm? No, not 8mm. It got Nicolas Cage in. When I figure out the name of it, basically it shows 8 different points of views. We'll figure it out. It got like 8 different point of views, right? And all these point of views, well, as we bring the prophets in, y'all gonna see that it wasn't just the kings that was out here living wicked. Because if we just put this on the king, then if it was just on the king, God would have tore that king out of the, get him out of here and put someone else in there. We've seen it done. But we understand that this wickedness was not just the king. These things, they're talking about the head, but the body followed. This is why it's important for us as believers that we follow Christ, right? Because he is the head of our life. We should do what he is. But if you bring other worship into that, then you're just like Solomon. Make sense? All right. All right, let's continue on. 34? Nope, 33, but I ended in my ways to do what is right in my eyes and my laws and my right ruling, as his father did, David. But do not take all the reign out of his hand, because I have made him a ruler of all the days of his life for the sake of my servant David, who I'm chose because he guarded my command and laws. So he said he's keeping Solomon in reign because Solomon did what? Nothing. The only reason Solomon is staying in there is because David kept all his laws. Right? That's what it said. Now, I could, if I wanted to go on my phone and Google it, but I believe you would trust me if I say this, because I wouldn't lie to you. In the book of John, there's something that's said by our Lord and Savior. And it goes a little something like this, and I'm paraphrasing, but if you want to find this, I think it's around 15 somewhere. If y'all got to Google, go there faster. But in this line, he says, I have kept my Father's command. And if you stay in me, then you keep my Father's command. Am I off? Can you want to read that for me?
It's 15. Let's see if I need to go up.
So, and you might have to go back a little bit because it's kind of lengthy because he talks about a whole lot. He actually tells you the command to be kept. Go ahead.
Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love.
All right. So the only reason that Solomon is being rewarded because of who? The only reason that we are being rewarded because of who? And if we stay in his love, then we stay in. There you go. We are command keepers because we're in Christ. So we see this. And he said, my servant David, who I choose because he guarded my command and my laws. And I shall take the reins out of the hands of his son and give it to you, the 10 tribes, and give you the 10 tribes. So here we see coming out of the hands of the son. Remember, the reign is being torn from Solomon, but it's taken out of the hands of the son, but yet he has a remnant to go back to because of promise to David. I said I would not totally destroy him, and the only reason I'm doing this is because of David. And his son I give one tribe, so that my servant David shall always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city which I have chosen for myself to put my name there. Brief pause. In Daniel, when Eric was teaching Daniel, right? The last thing I believe that happens in the book of Daniel is they go into captivity, right? The last son goes in. One of them, he gets his eyes poked out. I think Southern Kingdom, right? Northern Kingdom, but like a wicked king. I can't remember. They all jumping in my head. Huh? Zedekiah. He goes into captivity, right? No, he dies. Where does he go in captivity? Help me out here.
Blind.
They took him blind, but he go in. Now you would think that that's the end, right? The line of David it's done. It's finished. Kaputzi. But if y'all remember deep down in the story, there was somebody that was brought from the prison, right? And he was set at the king's table to dine with him. Anybody remember who that was? All right, look, check it out. Google is a great thing.
Lame too, wasn't he?
Yeah, he wasn't. He was lame.
Wasn't he crippled? He couldn't. His nurse had to carry him.
That was Mephibosheth.
Okay.
We're talking about during the time of Babylon. There was a king from the line of David that was brought out and sat with the king and ate. Look it up. Now, Mephibosheth was during David's time. This was during Babylon. I say that to say because even after coming out at captivity, God still kept his promise. He still had a remnant of Judah from the line of David still sitting at a king's table. He never broke his promise to David. Even if you go all the way down throughout histories after that, you had the Maccabean the revolt, which guess what tribe they were from? Judea. It's always been, when it came to it, the line of Judah is the line that steps up. Therefore, we have the roaring lion of Judah as the lamb. Sound, you putting it all together, the things we hear. All right, as we continue. So I take you, and you shall reign over all that your being desires, and you shall be the king over Israel. So now we have two kings. King of Israel, king of Judea, going forward. Now, a lot of the times when we hear prophecies, we think, we have the whole story. But right then, hearing this, what do you think Solomon is going to think about Jeroboam? Or is it Rehoboam? Rehoboam. Which one am I? Rehoboam. All right, got to keep the kings divided. Name's still close. Which one? What do you think Solomon's thought is about that? He just heard that the king, Solomon's alive. He's not dead. So what do you think Solomon's going to do? Doesn't say that. Or does it? All right, let's keep going. I want you to understand where Solomon is right now. His mindset is, I just heard the kingdom is going to be torn from me. But I fear the Lord enough to, you get where I'm saying? Solomon is in this place where we know that Solomon is kind of spiraling down. So all right. And it shall be, if you obey all that I command, and you shall walk in my ways. The one thing that he took care of David, because David did. And you should, because remember, the honor that was given to Solomon is not past. Meaning, you are the new king of Israel. I'm giving this to you. You don't get grandfathered in because of David. This is for you now. You understand? While when we see what Jeroboam, we see what the names. All right, that's why I like them being divided in the north and south. When we see that the king of the south is, when we see his wickedness and what he does, we see why it's such a great travesty. Because it's like this: you had a fresh start. You didn't have to deal like Saul had to deal. You didn't have to deal like David had to deal. You didn't have to deal like Solomon had to deal. I'm giving you your own 10 kingdoms as a fresh deal to you. But I give you the same order of commands. My laws, my command. This is for you now. My laws and command, as my servant David did, then I shall be with you and build for you a steadfast house, as I built for David, and I shall give you Israel. Now, we know when he's talking about house, we talk a house, we're talking about a name. We're talking about building a name amongst all of the other people, just like David's name was. All right. And because of this, I humbled the seed of David, but not forever. We see that the seed of David has been, when we're saying humbled, not killed, not destroyed, but kind of put off to the side. We're not going to hear too much about the line of David except during the kings that come after him, and it's more of like conflict. We're not hearing about them like we heard with the greatness of David. A lot of them, they come in and they redo something that was undone. All right, we took out all the idolatry worship. All right, well, I'm gonna put it all back and add a couple more. Whoa, wait a minute. Then another king come in and he say, this is horrible. I hate it. Tear it down. But then a king over in Israel is saying, we don't even care. We're just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And Judea is going to say, well, eventually we should just get worse too. All right. I've kind of walked y'all through this because as we get into it, we're going to be talking about the kingdom sometimes, and we'll be specifically talking about Rehoboam and his kingdom and the things he going. So you have to follow the line, because these lines sometimes they interact in war and sometimes they interact in agreement. because they're both wicked. I want you to keep in mind that sometimes you may see two kings. One is from the line of David that was promised the throne, and one is Jeroboam's sons, Rehoboam. One of them is one of the sons from the south, and what he does is he doesn't pass on righteousness to his children. He passes on wickedness. But also the kids up in Jerusalem, the king's kids, they're not passing on that wickedness, but sometimes they are because parents, influence around them. Sometimes they're too young, and sometimes they do stand up, even though they are too young. All right. I'm a 40. I'm a 40. And Solomon sought to kill Jeroboam. Wow, that was quick. And Jeroboam rose up and fled to Egypt. Again, Jeroboam ran to this man's house. When I say his house, Egypt would have been part of his house, right? Because that's his wife. Solomon's wife is Egyptian. This man has said, hey, there is the king of Israel. I mean, the king of, Jerusalem is trying to kill me. I need a place to hide. Where's a better place to go hide in at his father-in-law's land? You get what I'm saying here? You see this. And we're going to see how Egypt even turns later on to come in, help and attack, and even to rob. All right. In the days of Solomon, he ran to Egypt until the death of Solomon. Now Solomon dies. And the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did in his wisdom, are they not written in the Acts of Solomon? Now, as I looked, and I'm helping y'all out with some of the things that I dealt with when I read the scriptures, and if y'all have found something different, please help me even further. When I went and looked for the Acts of Solomon, you'll always get pointed to Chronicles, which most of the stuff has already been reviewed. But we know that when Solomon died, when Israel was sacked, a lot of the information was lost. So there are books that are spoken of here. Some you may be able to find, some you don't. Some of the prophets that you hear that spoke and prophesied, some of the books you won't. So we see that prophecy that they were doing right there, like Obadiah, not Obadiah, Abijah. The names always elude me. That's why I'm never good with names. Too many names in my head. Abijah, the prophet that came in, that was prophesizing to Jeroboam, right? He's a prophet, but no book. But he prophesied. He was doing work for the Lord. He would pop up all the time. Hey, man, you're wrong. Got to go. Hey, man, you should have did this. In fact, he did this for a while until his death. He had it, but this is where we find the information. So a lot of the stuff, before y'all go bog y'all heads down, search the internet, do deep dives and all this stuff, I did a lot of them. If y'all find something more than what I did, please share it. But the majority of what I found about these prophets and seers that we see in this book are right here. In fact, first and second Samuel, and this book right here, First Kings and Second Kings, was a mixture of a lot of those writings, but these two books are a credit to Samuel's writing. So just a little bit about the Bible as you go through it. And I say they're credited to Samuel's writing because all of this would have happened. Some of it would have been pastime, Samuel's death, but the writers that would have kept going would have been writing it in that name. Because as you see, we don't have those other books. Like Gad, who was dealing with David, so Nathan, they would have wrote notes to attest to what they said and did for the kings. But we don't have those. What we do have is what they did say, and we can do a little deductive reasoning from what was said to them. That makes sense? Put the whole story together. Now, we may shift to Chronicles, not tonight, but we may shift to Chronicles just for a bit, because Chronicles tell us a little bit more about the battles that went between the kings as they started to set up their reign. Like Jeroboam and Rehoboam, they kind of got into it because it was like, hey, my dad died, I'm the king, let's just get an army and go over here and just crush them right now. And in that process, after Rehoboam come back and set up his kingdom in Jerusalem like he was, in the process of that, God comes and say, hey, don't fight against your brothers. And they go back. You get what I'm saying? So conflict is there and it's heating up because now you have a kingdom that's not so much a divided kingdom like I'm divided and you're way over there. Nope. You're literally right here. Every day I wake up, because before, when I would come through Jerusalem and Israel, as I would walk through all of Israel as a whole, because Israel was a whole at one time. It wasn't split. Now we have Judea and we have Israel. Will implode. So think about it. You wake up in the morning and like, yeah, I'm Judean. This is why I kind of want to divide it. And you start walking down the street and you get right to the walls of Israel. Are you not an Israelite? How do you feel getting to the walls of Israel coming from Jerusalem and can't even walk into something named after you? You see this internal conflict that's happening right here just by the division, not because God made it so. It wasn't never supposed to be like that. You should have been, as an Israelite, should have been able to walk from Judea all the way down to Dan. But you can't now because you got two kingdoms that are warring, that are related, that have been following tribes, man. We have followed this nation. And I know I'm belaboring a little part, and trust me, it's not because I didn't have my iPad. The only thing I had on my iPad was, actually, I really didn't have anything. I kind of bring it sometimes for no reason. But I don't most of the time. Most stuff is just, like I said, spirit-led. Can you think of having this city where at one time your own brother, your own sister might have been over in the tribe of Dan? Because remember, they intermarried between the tribes. But now you have 10 tribes that are just strictly over there in Israel. Man, I can't even go to the family reunion this year. Where's that? Oh, it's in Israel. Why can't you? I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew. I'm in Judea. I got the term Jew, Jews, Judea. Now we see how the division. I even tell you how eventually it just became all of them. Oh, y'all Israelites, we just call you all Jews. That's what the Romans did. You get where I'm going? Now we no longer even call the people that we have learned about historically, right? We just call them all Jews. They weren't just Jews. They were Danites, Naphtaliites, Simonites, Simeonites. They were all part of different tribes. It was just Israel. And now they're just Jews. You get where I'm going with this? You see how we see the fall of a nation. We're watching it. We're watching history unfold to right where it's at right now. Division of tribe, division of nation. All right. Got a little bit more time. And Rehoboam went to Shechem. Y'all remember Shechem? Anybody remember the story of Shechem? Now, I went back and I read the story of Shechem. Shechem was this place for all of Israel. Rehoboam went to all of Israel. All had went up to go to Shechem to basically make him king. But the thing about Shechem, the history of it, this town started with Dana, the sister. Remember the sister? That they went up there and they defiled her, and Simeon and Levi was like, let's kill him. This was the city where they circumcised all of the people, waited till they were all wounded, and then killed them. Now you go back and you read like the book Jasher, Jubilee, Genesis, you hear this story, but this was the echo. This is why this place right here is weird, because this was the place when they took it over, everybody around said, the Hebrew boys, because that's what they called them, they must be powerful because they killed an entire city, just them two, by themselves. This was the story that y'all get it? You see what I'm saying? It's talked about that two of them went and struck a city in a night. So this place still holds that history. They talk about it. All right. So they went up to their camp. And it came to be when Jeroboam, son of Nebat, heard this, he was still in Egypt. He's still hanging out there. Solomon is dead. His son is being king. All right. For he had fled from the presence of the king Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt. I can't give the Pharaoh too much crap, because how would he have known that he was in his land? But it's just, I try to give people a break because I wasn't there. I don't know. But I give him a break. All right. All right. And it was still a mystery to me, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt. And they sent and called him, and Jeroboam and all the assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam. Now they're all there. Your father made our yoke hard. Now lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, then we will serve. Who are the people that's talking to Solomon? Are they the Israelites? Because if we remember, Solomon didn't have the Israelites working. Huh? It was Judah, right? But who are they talking about? The workers. Who are the workers that they're talking about? Yes, the representatives are speaking, the men, the tribal elders, but who are the workers that they're talking about? What does Solomon have? What was he commissioned to do? He built the temple. And building the temple, he only had the Jews doing what? In service of the temple, right? So who are these workers that they're talking about? The foreigners, the ones who came over on ships and everything else. All right, Solomon beat us down, and we accepted that because we wanted to come over here. But we're asking you now, as the new king, take it a little easy on us. The temple is built, take it a little easy on us, and we'll serve you for the rest of your days. Now, that's an older group going to him. And Jeroboam said, or is this Rehoboam? I'm always getting
heavy
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have his extravagant living that he was living. They asked him to lighten up on excessive taxes.
Free the load. Free the load. Free the workload, free the labor, free everything. The city was under distress because they are now taking more taxes. They're putting a heavier yoke on the people. They're increasing their work. Might as well go back to Egypt. You see, but this question came and he said, well, let me consult some other people. And he went and asked his younger friends. And his younger friend, the older ones first. Those are the ones who came and they said, they said, lighten the load. The older ones are telling them this. And this is when he said, I'm going to step off and go ask somebody else. His buddies, his friends. He, man, you guys, man, they want me to lighten the load. We probably sitting around having, what did they drink back then? I mean, we just found out they had ice skates, woody teeth. Nah, we quick to say they had Muddy Water. Y'all be surprised, man, if I'll come back and something in history said Israel had the first movie theater. Everybody in here be like, oh, I'm just saying maybe they had some soda. All right, may have some wine. They sitting around having some wine and with the grapes, throwing them up in the air. The young friends like, ooh, man, catch that grape. Yeah, man, what you got going on? Man, they was out there tripping them. Them old folks came to me talking about lighting their load. Yeah, man, them people crazy, man. We need this money. Boom. I'm going to listen to y'all. So he did that. He hearkened to his friends. Note to self. Don't always listen to your friends. Some of them give horrible advice. Some of them give good advice. But listen for the bad advice. Because this right here, we know the history possibly could have changed if he would have made a sound decision. To say, yeah, you know what? Lightening the load would be a great thing in this time. Especially since the kingdom is divided and everything going on. My dad told me this was coming. Israel is showing up to Judea to talk about lighting the load and saying they will follow you. Which means whoever the 10 tribes or the 10 heads of Israel showed up to ask for this agreement. The elders, remember? All right, and they'll say, go away 3 days, then come back to me. And the people went. Then Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father, and Solomon, while he still lived, and he said, what do you advise me to answer these people? All right. And the old people told him, hey, lighten the load. If you are a servant of these people today, you shall serve them and shall answer them and speak good words to them. They shall be your servants all the days. But he ignored them. That is the first words of 8. But he ignored the advice the elders gave him and consulted the young men whom he had grown up with, who stood before him. And he said, what advice do you give? How should you give an answer to the people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? And the young men, now here's the thing about these young men. Young men were workers. They were probably in the community working harder. They didn't have, because remember, this is still the same labor, but these are his friends. They still speak for the group of people in their element working. Meaning, if I'm 20 and I'm talking to the king, just because I'm 20 doesn't mean that every other 20-year-old is like me. You know what I'm saying? I have to be in mind. So the elders that went, who stood before him, said, hey, even though I'm an elder and I stand here before you because I served your father, remember they gave the lineup, served your father and I served David and I served your father before he died, right? I stand here to tell you in my old age and looking across the board, it'd probably be a smarter thing to ease the yoke because the older people are talking to him. It's a smart thing because easing the yoke is not just beneficial, for the older people, guess what it is beneficial for? The younger group that's working. So, and like the thinking of other people. You see what I'm saying? But the younger people, fully energetic, able-bodied, when they would hear something like that, they're thinking across the board about the 20-year-old is they can work harder. Why should we line their yoke? Look how young and fit we are. They can work hard. Don't cut them no slack. And this is what he did. And he said to them, after the young men gave his advice, he grew up, and they spoke to him saying this, the people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter. Say this to them, my lighter finger is thicker than my father's waist. You know what he was trying to say? We eating good. We eating good. What do you mean I need to cut back? Things are going good here. Look at my finger. This thicker than my father. You see what I'm saying? I'm doing well. I don't need to cut back. Like Pastor Allen was saying, I don't need to cut back on the taxes. I don't need to cut back on the workload. I don't need to cut back because I'm doing good. Why would I do that? You see what I'm saying here? And now my father laid a heavy yoke on you. I'm talking to the people. You. But I add to your yoke. My father flogged you with whips. Now, did we hear anywhere that Solomon was beating anybody with whips? So far, the whole story that we heard is the people came in, they were working well. So where did this beating of whips come from? Maybe Solomon was beating them with whips. Or do we call Jeroboam a liar? Or Rehoboam? Rehoboam. Do we? He's talking about, this is Rehoboam. So Rehoboam. So my question is he called, did his father whip the ones that was in service? I don't know. Maybe he's just saying it. But I know he said that his father whipped them with whips, and he's going to double down. He's going to beat them with scorpions. Now, that's a crazy thing, just having scorpions, just throwing them at people. It was a type of whip, but. All right. So now we see that Jeroboam and Rehoboam have involved the people. They have brought it. The people have come before them. Because remember, it was between them two, the two kingdoms. But the people that came to him to give him a way. But we already know that that way was not going to happen. So we'll put a pin in it right here. When we pick back up, we'll start looking at. Let me get these names right, because I'm Jeroboam. Mm-hmm.
Jeroboam.
Yeah, he was the one. He was a servant. The king. They didn't want to give no lead. He said, look at my finger. Ain't it thick? All right. Any questions? I know a lot. We pound the history a lot because as we go through the kingdom, I want you to keep that picture that the rest of the world is advancing. People are putting wooden teeth in their mouth and creating skin rafts to float. We're starting to see the advancement of the people around, and we're starting to see a decline in Israel. As the world advances, Israel is becoming more wicked. Now, I can't say they're not advancing, but I can say we see their wickedness, which led to a decline, which eventually Eric taught us, desolation.